A sad state for SK, most certainly, but always an opportunity to prove yourself anytime you set foot on this stage. I'm Dracos, this is Vedius. We're getting ready for the first game of the day. And after Misfits' game yesterday, what's the expectations here, Vedius? I mean, obviously, SK is still
it's
the underdog.
over. They have no chance.
They're
left.
broken emotionally, physically.
No, I think it was just a blip on the radar. They fell behind very hard, very early. But one of the big things that I think we are starting to question for Misfits is how well they can play through their bot side of the map. Typically, they've been a very top-focused team, playing through Febiven and playing through Dan. So I'm curious as to whether or not today's draft will be about the bot side of the map, or will they go back to what has worked for them so far?
And it is always an interesting question, because on the one hand, you have to keep finding wins to stay at the top of the table, but on the other hand, experimentation, diversifying your playstyle is crucial to success at the top of the table. So we'll see what Misfits want to do here. For SK Gaming, it was an interesting day yesterday. Obviously, brutally one-sided game, but we did see some kind of old comfort picks coming through for a lot of the SK lineup. See if that's the same case today, as they are on the blue side up against Misfits on the red. Already Gragas, Rakan, and Ornn taken away.
So we are, of course, on patch 10.4, and we've seen some changes in priority. Aphelios, not always the first pick. Pantheon has actually been pretty high priority. That was the first pick for Misfits yesterday. Same for G2. We've also seen Sacre fall to the wayside. Top lane is not really a thing for her anymore. We're actually going to see an Aphelios ban come out from SK, showing that respect over towards Bvoy. Something that Misfits has liked to go for is that Rakan, which of course they still can go for. But we're still looking at things like the set as a priority pick. And of course, with the Rakan banned away, Rakan likely going to fall to the wayside as well, which means Misfortune very high in priority right now. But we also know that Crownshot loves things like the Ezreal. But how can we forget we're on 10.4? Senna, for those that don't know, she's been rising in popularity on this patch. Cloud9 showcased over in North America how you can make her work much more effectively when you don't farm. When you put her on an AD carry and don't do what an AD carry has been training to do their entire lives.
You can get creeps or you can get souls. That's essentially the choice you're going to make, and for Senna, it's a pretty easy one. Now, Sejuani will be the first lock-in for the side of Misfits Gaming. We've seen what Razork can do on this champion.
They're going to take the Tahm Kench away, but I don't think this does a lot, Dracos, because you can pair all kinds of stuff up with the Senna down the bot lane. Things like
what melee champion isn't happy to have farm, Vedius?
I mean, what was it this morning? Honwa Life, I think they paired up the Volibear.
Yes.
So I think you can get pretty creative with what you want to pair up with it. It's just about what you've been practicing. So I'm a little surprised, but Misfits clearly don't want to have to deal with that Tahm Kench. So SK going to respond with a blind Gangplank. Very dangerous against a player like Dan, who does love his counter picks.
And this is interesting as well. Jenax has, of course, busted out the Mordekaiser. I'd be surprised to see it, but now locked in. This is something Frost has been waiting for. In a meta full of tanks, when will Trundle rear his ugly head? And there it is, Troll King himself. See exactly where he's going to go, how he's going to operate. Could technically go into the bottom lane.
That's true. You expect him to go into the jungle position as an answer to the Sejuani, but as you rightly said, could be played in support as well. We're now looking at the final pick for Misfits, and I love this priority on the Vladimir. Something that Dan actually played a fair amount last year in the summer split when he did join on to the Misfits squad. Really great pick into the Gangplank. Not that it beats it early, but Gangplank can't really ever kill a Vladimir, which means he gets that free laning phase. He's going to have that scaling aspect available to him, and you can just see a lot of damage now available for Misfits as you reach the latest stage.
And the thing that excites me is one of the expectations we've set for Misfits is that they haven't always been consistent about playing around the bottom side. But Vladimir's not a champion you usually gank a ton. That's a champion you wait to scale. So maybe we finally see Misfits shift that attention bot side.
They got a Tahm Kench down here, Dracos.
But we could. How LPL do they want to get? Is this going to be I'm a W bot, or is this going to be I'm going to dive towers with the Tahm Kench? That's my dream, Betty.
That's a great reference, because the LPL is one of the regions that loved running the Varus Tahm Kench. We heard Frost talking about it a lot at Worlds last year, where they use that duo to dive. And we'll see if Misfits look to go for that direction themselves, because playing against the center in lane, very difficult. You want a higher range AD carry. You want someone that can deal with her obnoxious poke, and I think Varus could be a solid pick. But we'll have to wait and see. The bans have been coming out for the second phase. Syndra and Galio are going to be taken away from the side of Misfits. I love the Galio ban, showcasing, okay, Galio support is another one that could be paired up well with the center. Acts as a pretty strong follow-up. And we also see the Aurelia being taken off the board from SK, potentially saying here that they don't want to allow this flexibility of the Vladimir and having to deal with an Aurelia on the top side.
The debate here on the AD carry pick is interesting from the side of Misfits Gaming. They're hovering a lot of
others,
spicy stuff, but the amount of times it's been the Varus, it is the Varus now locked in. So we still don't know what version of Varus Tahm Kench we're going to see, but we've laid out the expectation. It could be the aggressive bot dive focused style Varus Tahm Kench lane.
Ooh, but the hover of the Ezreal, do we actually just see support Senna? That could be pretty cool. Ender's been making jokes about it all week, where he's basically like,
so mad that
you know
Tahm
what
Kench
else
is-
you could do? You could actually just put her in support, and that's what SK is going to do. They're just going to put that in support, and now you've got a very heavy poke lane with Ezreal and Senna. Very obnoxious to deal with. The thing you've always got to be careful of when you're going for these ranged supports is the ability of the enemy to all in is very powerful, because they don't have the best tools that once a CC lands, you're probably going to die because you are quite squishy. So we'll see how that lane plays out. I would imagine Misfits can invest their resources into the bot side of the map. They have the tools to do it with the Sejuani, and they're going to have a very strong mid-jungle duo as well, given that they've drafted themselves the Lucian. Very strong in the early game, very easy for this champion to be able to get priority. And Misfits, I quite like their comp in its entirety, but there's very good scaling on the side of SK. Their laning phase isn't the strongest. They don't have the easiest lanes to play around. Bot lane doesn't really have a huge amount of gank setup. It's obnoxious. It's got a lot of poke. They might not get the first push on the first few waves, but they don't have a huge amount of setup either. You also can't really gank a Gangplank lane, especially against a Vladimir. So I feel like we're going to be seeing a lot of action around the mid 2 versus 2, and I think that any early mistakes from either side could be massive in swinging who gets the early priority and how they can move that around the map.
Well, and especially with two compositions that do not have a ton of CC. So it's not like you have a Gragas where even if you fall behind, you're going to have some late game kind of guarantee. So Sejuani going to fit that role to a certain degree, but I think you've hit the nail on the head, Vedius. It feels like get the ball rolling early, get started, find 1 or 2 kills, and take over the game. But I'm worried for Misfits. This Trundle looks so good into this composition. That Varus and Tahm Kench are going to get trapped, and I just want to see what Trick can do. If we finally see Trick live back to the glory days, the G2 days, or if it's going to be another struggle for SK.
Well, for both teams, I think they both just want a better performance compared to what happened yesterday, because Misfits got smashed by Fnatic, SK got smashed by G2, but now they're going up against each other, both looking for a big win.
And here we are, day 2. SK versus Misfits. Vedius, you said it. Redemption for both teams to a certain degree. Chance to recover from the previous day's struggles. And laning phase is going to be hugely defining, not just because of the amount of aggressive picks that we see or the scaling that we see on the top side of the map or some of our predictions for Varus Tahm Kench even, but mostly because SK is a team that has very frequently lost before the laning phase has even ended. So a lot of pressure on them early in this game just to do better, honestly.
Yeah, and when we think about early push, who's able to have control over the waves during the first few minutes of the game, Sacre on the Gangplank is going to guarantee it. The thing about Gangplank in lane, we'll actually get to see it. If we can have some vision over the top lane matchup, what Gangplanks love to do is just run up and hit you. They've got a great passive for burning you. They can harass you with the Q, and he just does so much damage, especially when paired up with the Corrupting Potion stacks and Grasp. He can be so obnoxious to deal with in the early laning phase. But it looks like that they might not be doing that. They're instead going to go for a bit of an early invade, stealing away the top side, but a really good ward placement from Misfits to recognize that this could happen will give Razork all the information that he needs to be able to set up an invade.
Interesting now. SK potentially looking to split to the top side of the map. Vladimir, Gangplank, not always where you see aggression, but you mentioned it already, Vedius, the potential for Gangplank to just bully out in this lane early on before Dan has any kind of cooldown reduction or points in that transfusion.
So what's interesting here is that, oh, I love this, the sweeper coming out from Razork. Very common, obviously, on many junglers. You can see that Trick doing the same. But the risk that Razork has right now is that bot lane has priority and SK knows. So Trick has already cleared the red buff. They're making their way down, and Razork forced to disengage. So great setup here from from SK rather, to interfere the early jungle pathing from Razork. You guys heard the analyst talking a lot about how Razork as a jungler is very influential in the early game for Misfits. He decides a lot, and SK's plan has been about trying to interfere with a lot of that early game planning by stealing away some of his crucial buffs.
Has absolutely been a standout. And I love what we're seeing from him here in the jungle, opting for the Hail of Blades. There are no other melee champions outside of the Tom Kench on this team, so we'll be able to proc his own passive a little bit more effectively. But with this bit of disruption in the early game, the question does become, what can he get done here? And question also, what can Trick get done? Do we still see the passive farming jungler on the opposite side, or is Trick going to try to use this pillar and make some plays happen?
Well, as we talked about, Trick doesn't have a huge amount of lanes that he can play around. Lucian, very difficult lane to gank. Even with a Cassio landing her miasma, it's not a reliable setup to actually guarantee a kill onto a Lucian. So tricky to deal with, a lot of mobility just from his E. Meanwhile, on the bot lane, given the wave state right now, they could look for a gank, but again, very dangerous, very difficult to do. Senna's W is about the only wave setup you actually have, or gank setup rather, which means that I think Trick doesn't actually have a huge amount of options when it comes to early game ganks. His priority should be counter gank. He should be trying to stop Razork, trying to influence the early game, and try and snowball some of the laners from Misfits, or make some of the laning phases challenging. You know, Febiven on this Lucian can be very difficult to deal with, and you don't want to run the risk of him getting dived in the mid lane, so you want to make sure that you have good vision control around these areas of the map. You're just trying to make life difficult for Razork so that you can gradually scale up and use some of the powerful late game tools that you do have. Because for SK, what you've got to acknowledge is that they have a lot of range and a lot of disengage. And when we think about how this game is going to play out in the later stages, Misfits have to play very front to back. Their best dive threat is Dan. We know that he loves to find flanks. We know that he loves to focus on the backline, but there's an Ezreal, a lot of mobility. There is the Cassio with the miasma. There's the Trundle with the pillar. There's the Gangplank with the ultimate. And there are all these tools on SK's comp that basically say, hey, okay, if your Vladimir dives on us, we're going to separate him from the rest of your team by just utilizing all these zoning tools. We'll then kill the Gangplank, and then we'll kill the rest of you. But in order for them to get there, they have to get through the laning phase, which is why putting Razork behind is so important.
But it is, as you said, already difficult. Trick may have to pay some more attention to that mid lane. You can see Jenax taking the bad end of a lot of trades here. Of course, has opted to take the cleanse up against the likes of this Sejuani.
I like it a lot.
Yeah, a lot of caution. I think good respect paid over to Febiven, but Febiven already forcing the back out, and Jenax with no TP means that he most likely will lose at least one wave here, potentially a plate as well. So already a small laning disadvantage to a medium laning disadvantage just 5 minutes into the game.
Yeah. And in terms of that mid lane matchup, we didn't get to talk about it a huge amount in the early laning phase because of some of the jungle shenanigans, but I've had the opportunity to play against quite a few Lucians recently. Turns out, great pick into Knock. But what I've been seeing a lot is Lucians love to start with the E. And I think it's a great choice against champions like Cassio as well, because what you can do is the moment they overstep to try and last hit, you hit them with an auto, use the E, get the auto reset, and then you immediately proc with the double passive hit to press the attack. Gives you a lot of damage in the early game, and it allows the Lucian to also sidestep any potential Qs that Jenax may try to throw out. It gives you a lot of early power and a lot of early trading setup.
The good news for SK is that they have managed to take this Mountain Drake one under their belt. Trundle happy to have the additional resistances. Everyone else just hoping for a different Drake next. It will be the Infernal. And already seeing Trick move his way back into the mid lane. Hopefully, with the tier now stacking, Jenax will be a bit more comfortable in future trades. But I think you're right. I think when you look at Febiven, he's so clearly confident in this matchup, ready to step forward and just get aggressive onto Jenax.
He's got to be careful now, though, because Jenax is, of course, level 6. And Febiven, if he tries to force an all-in, there is the risk of the ultimate coming out, stunning him up. And Cassio, it's not that she lacks damage, it's that sometimes the mana can gate her from being able to get all that damage out in the early game.
The thing you said is you got to land the Q for the Twin Fang to really do any significant damage, and if they're stunned, it's pretty easy to land the Q, some might say.
For sure. And so we can see, of course, tier likely going to be worked on for Crownshot as well, so we're going to have double tier on the side of SK, a lot of scaling on their side, and we're also going to keep track of the souls that Limit is picking up for himself. Of course, he's not in that AD carry position, he is in the support position, already sitting at about 20 souls, so he gets that additional 25 range, and he's going to be building the lethality. He's likely going to go for an early Umbral Glaive. He's going to be a damage threat as well, which is something that Misfits will have to recognize and appreciate once you get into the later stages of the game. And so far, first 7 minutes in, we're looking at a swap soon to be able to play up for the early Herald. And SK, because they've got the push on this wave, they're going to likely clear out this cannon, use the ultimate, get a quick early base so that they can be first on the play, and then they can set up for the Rift Herald and likely take it as it spawns. Bear in mind, Dan has just used his TP back into top lane as well. Will we see the swap now, or are they actually going to stay for an extra wave?
For now, they have XP advantage. Important to know that Bvoy turning level 6 could be a big break point in this lane matchup. Once the ultimate becomes available, the gank setup becomes infinitely easier. But they are just going to stay. So not opting to swap, not opting to look for the Herald play at 7 minutes and 40 seconds. Instead, just going to play this lane phase out a little bit further.
Okay, so they're just going to stick in the 2 versus 2. I think this is also fine. Like, they're building small advantages. They're still stacking up souls. They're still scaling. But now Misfits, they're looking for a gank up top. Of course, the controller is going to mitigate this. And Dan with no real gank setup, it's not going to be easy for Misfits to make this play. But Razork just hit 6 alongside Trick. Both junglers now prime and ready to look for a play.
Trick has to be careful here, though. Steal a lot of resistances, but still not that tanky at this point in the game. He's going to get stunned up. The Cassio now coming in. He's not going to be able to keep himself alive for long enough. The Ignite will take him down. Trick oversteps and gets taken down. Sacre on the way forward. Jenax getting burned through. Twin Fang is not enough. Forced to flash out to safety and misses just monstering that skirmish.
And Febiven just styling on SK right there. You can see the 2v2 power of the Lucian and the Sejuani. Their focus was, of course, onto Trick, the troll, who does steal the stats away from Razork, but he doesn't then suddenly mitigate all this damage coming out from Febiven this early on into the game. With the Ignite as well for the added damage, Misfits are able to find an early skirmish, and this is exactly what SK wanted to avoid. They didn't want to try and go for these early skirmishes. They don't want to allow the Lucian to get ahead, and it all comes off the back of this ward. Febiven using his early prio to help Razork gain vision control around the river. They spot Trick out trying to move through his own jungle, and just look how quickly they melt through him. No stats are enough to keep you from that damage, and Sacre arrives with then a great sidestep with the E from Febiven. You can see what can be very obnoxious for the caster, trying to land those skill shots in that 1 versus 1.
Yeah, the Twin Fang just really not enough there to fire back. Well played overall. Febiven only going to get stronger in this lane too. He still has not backed. He went back once. He got the Vamp Scepter. Should be able to go back. We'll be at least able to complete the Cutlass. See if the Blade of the Rune King comes out as well. But that's going to be huge just in terms of the individual 1v1. Very difficult for Cassio to get away at that point. And Dan, of course, a man who's been looking to scale, now has the cooldown reduction build. 20% already coming through. And GP, with the early Mortal Reminder, will mitigate some of the healing. But lane phase just basically even. Both of these champions waiting on the sidelines still. We're 10 minutes in the game later, 15 minutes in the game later. They're having a fine time.
Yeah, I mean, Misfits is in a comfortable spot themselves. The bot 2v2 is pretty even. You already talked about how Crownshot had a slight level advantage, but Bvoy going to quickly rectify that. Utilizing the ultimate to interrupt the base will, of course, allow Crownshot to be able to push in this bot wave, but Bvoy has the TP. Expectations, though, is that he'll use that TP bot. And SK could have used that window to then look for a rotation top to then try and make this swap, but of course, the Herald already being started. The big problem with SK losing that 2 versus 2 is, of course, it now makes Lucian stronger, and given that he already had priority before, now that Jenax doesn't have flash, Febiven is always guaranteed priority in that 1 versus 1, which means Razork can feel very safe in this setup because he knows his Lucian is always going to get there first, and if Trundle tries to contest him, he's going to lose, especially without flash.
Jenax taking a lot of damage here. Febiven playing it patient, though, does not want to get caught out. Razork with the clean dash and the ultimate. That's going to be another kill for Misfits.
Beautifully played. The setup was there, even with the cleanse. It wasn't enough, and SK, who wanted to avoid this aggression in the early game, is starting to fall behind.
Very difficult situation already. 1K deficit. Really, Mountain Drake, the only tangible advantage they've gotten. Now the Infernal Drake going to be started up by Misfits as well. They're getting everything. Keep in mind they have the Herald in Razork's back pocket, so they can look to break down one of these towers in the next play. Trick getting aggressive here, but can't do much past clear the wave as the Dragon finally will fall in favor of Misfits.
And we're going to have an Ocean Drake being the next available map rift.
Map rift. The thing.
The point I wanted to make was that I think Cloud would have been really good for SK because of the ultimate cooldown reduction on things like Gangplank, Cassio ult. Even an Ezreal ult, just having it up that much more often I think can be super valuable. They're, of course, not going to be the choice. The extra regeneration, however, in these extended fights, it's just going to complement a Vladimir very nicely. So it's something that SK have to be very cautious of. They don't want to concede too many of these Oceans because it's just going to make these late game fights that much harder. And again, I want to stress that SK do have options in the late game fights. We talked about how they do have this range, they do still have good scaling and damage, but it's all going to be about at what point these fights start to happen. Because Misfits have a much stronger mid-game spike. They're not waiting for tiers to stack up. They have a Lucian who's already got Blade of the Ruin King. Bvoy is going to have his Blade of the Ruin King very soon. I'm going to have a quick look at his gold. I think he right now has enough composition money to be able to buy that upgrade as well. And Dan going to be very close to upgrading his first key item as well. And so here we see another bit of trading in the mid lane.
Good reaction coming from Febiven. Dodges as he sees the miasma animation coming out, so will not let it connect to the ground before he gets that dash. Now just more damage. Good cancel comes in from Trick as well, but this mid lane matchup is brutal. Jenax is still getting smashed, only a 10 CS difference, but you can see the trades are just not in his favor whatsoever.
For sure. And this is some of the difficulty that SK is going to have to deal with for the foreseeable future. I imagine the Rift Herald is going to be used in the mid lane soon. You can see that 3 plates are up. Usually a Rift Herald takes about 2.5.
They know Flash is not available. The cleanse, even if it comes out, is not going to be enough. The sidestep from Febiven so clean. Watch him burn as you walk away. That's going to be tower for Misfits. Trick going to do what he can to stop this one, but Rift Herald should be able to grab at least 2 plates here.
Yeah, and they can probably convert it into a 3rd as well. I don't know if they'll try to dive Trick, but... Oh, the TP just going to be used to force them off as well. Trick actually going very aggressive here.
Very far forward, chasing down Febiven, and that's going to be big damage coming in from Limit. The snipe onto Febiven, the shutdown for Limit on the bottom side.
Hey, very valuable kill picked up for SK. They take advantage of the over-eagerness of Misfits, who wanted to try and secure that mid-tier 1, and they end up punishing it. So they at the very least get their first kill on the board. Misfits, though, still in that gold lead, still in a very commanding position after the early kills that they found themselves.
Have to see what now SK can do. They've obviously had that responsive play. They've been reactive. Let's see if they have anything to do proactively. They're going to send, for now, Jenax to the bottom side of the map. It looks like Limit and Crownshot will be taking up home in the mid lane. As we check in, Limit, obviously, getting the Umbral Glaive means he can deny so much vision. Going to make it very difficult for Misfits to step in when SK have pressure here on the bottom side.
Great pings coming out from Misfits to identify that SK could be on the blue buff right now. This is something that Razork does a lot. He seems to just have a sixth sense for where the enemy jungler is at all times. And Misfits very slowly, cautiously walking into their own jungle because they recognize, hey, we've got to be careful. SK was just here. And this is something that you'll see a lot from Razork, constantly pinging out, identifying where the enemy jungler could be. And it largely allows Misfits to play a very safe early game when junglers are looking to try and make these proactive plays.
I mean, super clever. And we heard it earlier today on the analyst test, kind of how vocal Razork is as a player, how key he has been in the early game, despite being very young, very new, and for Limit, potentially very dead in a moment here.
So close, but I don't think either one knows. Oh, now he sees it. The ultimate is available for Razork.
Bvoy's ult's there too. Ulti's gonna go in. Crownshot manages to make it out as real classic CC avoider. And I like the patience here from SK. Not getting over aggressive, not getting too greedy. I am still concerned about late game. I feel like Vladimir is always gonna be a ticking time bomb if their coordination is not top notch, but given the 1 to 3 kill difference, no towers have gone down yet. Misfits have not really gotten a greater advantage here.
They're just kind of reallocating their resources now. They know that if they keep the duo mid, they'll eventually be able to chip away at that tower. But they're going to use their early prio. Everyone knows where everyone is. Lucian is still pushing in bot. I think Misfits should avoid a fight, and they should just focus on securing that bot tower. Getting more money into Febiven.
And we just got to continue to praise Febiven here, because Jenax has been forced back once again without TP, because he has opted for the cleanse, and that means that Febiven got that tower uncontested without Misfits really having to use any additional resource. That is just individual laning prowess and advantages stacking up.
Yeah, and it all comes back to that early 2v2 trade that happened, allowing Misfits to get that early kill. And while the first blood didn't go on to Febiven, it didn't matter because it cost Jenax's flash. With the flash down, that allowed Misfits to keep playing through mid lane. And we talked about it in the draft. We talked about how Misfits wanted to invest in trying to get their mid laner ahead because they didn't really have a lot of ganks set up on the side lanes, and they've done a fantastic job of finding that opportunity. Now, they're moving Febiven around the map. They take the bot tower, they're looking for mid, they're looking for an engage.
Trick caught out once again. He's not even getting a chance to use his ultimate. Does buy a bit more time with the stopwatch. The cooling now coming out. Trick still burning down with the Denyk, but it looks like he is going to live. The tower, though, dropping. Misfits' main focus still achieved.
But Misfits can now use this and immediately rotate over to the Drake. I like Trick's response. You recognize that Misfits will take Drake, therefore will try and take Rift Herald. He is starting to regenerate some of that HP, and with the Cassio level 11, they should be able to melt through this, and Misfits likely won't be able to contest, given that Razork and Febiven's ultimate are unavailable. So, kind of the best of a bad situation for SK here, assuming that they can walk away with this.
Dan on the way down, taking a lot of damage from Sacre here, though, just getting really individually beat up in the 1v1. Denyk, though, potentially overstaying. Good damage coming in from the Bard's ultimate. Trick now using his ultimate to fire back, and Bvoy just taking that kill, ignoring the Trundle ult completely and finishing Trick off.
He knew that Trick did not have the flash, which means that after throwing out the ultimate and landing a perfectly timed Q, he's able to find a quick kill onto Trick. So Misfits continue to extend their advantages. They get themselves the first Ocean Drake. They have a 2k gold lead, and they walked away with a cheeky kill on the enemy jungle.
And this is the mid game that you were talking about, Vedius. We talked about how dangerous this was going to be for SK because Misfits went from 2 kill advantage to 3 kill advantage, additional dragon, 2 towers on top of that. Febiven is getting scarier and scarier. You can see the Essence Reaver is on the way, which means he's never going to run out of mana and will always be able to chase down Jenax in a side lane. So for SK, now is the time to be scared.
Yep, definitely is, especially given that Dan rushed Death Cap. Now, admittedly, this isn't really an optimal build because Death Cap largely benefits from having other AP items. But when I looked at it, I thought, is he going for Spellbinder? Maybe? Have I just forgotten how the item builds? Nope, in fact, he did just rush Death Cap. So he's definitely playing for damage.
He's committed to the scaling game. By buying it earlier, every AP purchase is more valuable, Vedius.
How much AP is he currently sitting on? Let's have a look. He's at 287 right now, which isn't bad. Definitely not bad.
Not enough to save this turret, as the Hit Herald is going to be used on the bottom side, and will balance the gold out once again. So as much as I feel like Misfits are very much winning the game, the gold is still relatively close, all things considered, at 19 minutes.
For sure, it's definitely true. You can see the difference in pressure right now. Even though the gold is even, it's how much value the gold brings relative to the teams. Yes, SK might only be in a slight deficit, but of course you're still stacking up tier items versus Misfits, who have, I don't know, double completed Blade of the Ruin King and a Death Cap. So it's one of those situations where right now Misfits is just so much stronger, and SK want to avoid trying to take these fights because if they do, that gold lead is going to balloon in Misfits' favor very quickly.
And I'm curious to see when we get to see Limit and Crownshot join the fight. Of course, Crownshot getting closer and closer to fully stacking there on the Muramana. Or the Manamune, rather. Muramana. And additionally, we now have 60 souls coming in for Limit, so has been scaling quite comfortably. That's 75 additional range and at least 60 more AD. So this duo hits hard. How exactly SK are going to use them is really the question.
Now, we have to acknowledge that double Trinity forces are now completed for SK. Definitely some big spikes completed for both the Ezreal and the Gangplank. On top of that, the Seraphs is fully stacked. The problem for Jenax is, of course, that his Leandries will be delayed, given that he's prioritizing the Zhonya's Hourglass. But you're starting to see how much more control Dan has in this side lane. So even though the Trinity Force is completed, a 2-level advantage in favor of Dan means that he's just that much stronger. You can't try and win side lane in the 1 versus 1. And the thing about it is we talked a lot about how SK do have options in the late game, but that's assuming Misfits even choose to go for 5v5. Because you've got to remember, in the 1v1s, SK can't win. No one's going to outduel the Lucian. No one at this point especially is going to outduel the Vladimir. So even though Misfits have strong mid-game team fighting, their ability to play through side lanes, through the scale, through the 1v1, the 1-3-1 option, is definitely that much stronger than SK.
I just feel like it's such a difficult task for SK. I understand the draft to see what they're doing. Scaling always feels like a better option if you're not confident in your early game, but things are still just going to be so difficult in terms of individual execution. Because even if we go late enough, Vedius, no matter what you do, if Vladimir finds a flank on your backline, Crownshot and Limit get one shot.
For sure.
And that's
kind of... that's the debate, right? That's why it's such a... It's scary to say, like, when... In a straight-up 5v5, I think SK's comp is very difficult to play against.
Yeah, for sure.
But you're right. If Dan gets a flank, he can just win the fight alone, right? And so that's the big debate around how those late game fights... So even though SK have a scaling comp, they don't have just an objectively better scaling comp.
No, not the case. The ultimate going to come out, though, for Bvoy, just looking to disengage. Good sidestep on the Ezreal ult. SK are going to walk away there. Just ulti traded for ulti. Jenax, sadly, Taking a big chunk of life there from
The bot lane, though, Vladimir pushing out another wave, creating a point of pressure. With the Ocean Drake spawning soon, someone from SK has to control that.
Bvoy potentially caught out. Jenax gonna get caught first, however. Dan running forward into Crownshot and Sacre. Can't afford to take that fight. GP ult used too. This is very scattered. Definitely not the fight that either team was looking for. Just a lot of cooldowns thrown back and forth. With Febiven seeing so many ultis used on the side of SK, does feel confident enough to step forward. Poor Pillar means Denyk gets sent out to safety rather than into SK's waiting arms. The Misfits will just walk away here.
Want to draw your attention to the bot lane. Look at all this farm that's just going into the arms of the tower. All this farm is being lost as Misfits and SK are just trading back and forth. SK wanted to try and fight for mid-prio, and now they're taking a gamble. They recognize the pressure is on, and they're going to try and rush this down with the Ezreal and the Cassio. This objective is going quick. A lot of ultimates are not available for Misfits.
Tom catch on the way in. Definitely have to be safe here. They're not losing any life. Senna's keeping everybody healthy. Razork is right in the pit. Can they secure this one trick? He's going to get it. Razork is now stuck in the pit. He's been knocked back by the pillar. Febiven running face first in with the coin, but they've taken so much damage they're getting poked down. This is the dream scenario for SK. Trick is going to have to give his life, but no, the flash used to take him out to safety. And Misfits, oh, walking away empty-handed. They must feel so foolish.
Quick thinking there from SK, recognizing that their Baron taking speed is exceptionally quick. Ezreal combined with the Cassio, they just melt through that objective, and they're able to walk away with it. They even got a kill onto Razork, and now they're pushing in top lane. They have 4 people. The recalls are going to be slower. SK should be able to convert this into 2 towers.
Now that they're ahead, this is an ideal team comp for Siege, and you've got Gangplank barrels that create so much space. Ezreal, the Senna as well, and Trick with the Pillar to either set up a kill or to disengage. It's going to be very difficult for Misfits to survive the next few minutes, but they seem unshaken. Move into the enemy jungle, take these small advantages, and look to the next fight.
I just love the quick thinking here from SK, and you can see Sacre trying to zone Misfits away with the Baron, with the barrels rather. Razork able to jump through without the miasma interfering, and it's just the smite fight that it ends up being won by Trick. I think Razork may have even smited a little bit early, and they're able to get away. And this time Dan doesn't get the flank. You can see how SK can just disengage. They can walk back. They can use their kite tools to keep Misfits at arm's length. They can't win these just front-to-back team fights. They need to find these flanks. And that was kind of the best case scenario for SK. And now they're reclaiming so much more control over the map. They should be able to take this tower as well. But let's see. Here's the TP. Dan looking for a flank.
Going to connect, but of course the QSS already available for both of the bot laners. Senna grabbing one as well, too. They really do not want to get locked down by the Sejuani. But outside of Sejuani ult and Varasalt, those are really the only ways to get a fight kicked off for the side of Misfits. Trick can look for the pillar here, knocking back Dan. Of course, dashless Vladimir does have the pool to make it out to safety. Just using Febiven to try to zone Jenax away. And SK just continuing to siege now into the mid lane. Bvoy's ultimate up and available. The last remaining engage tool if Misfits want to try and force a fight here. Otherwise, the cannon is just going to slowly chip away at this tower.
And notice how SK are just grouping up as 5. You might be wondering, what's the point of this? Well, they had a slow push on both bot and top, but they want to keep Misfits grouped. That's the best case scenario for them because we've seen how difficult it is for Misfits to actually win in these 5v5 scenarios. So now with the slow push that they had built bot, they can rotate from mid into bot and they can secure another objective. And SK, look at how quickly they've been able to flip this game on its head. We were talking about how Misfits got that early lead, were playing the mid game beautifully, and I wouldn't necessarily say that it was a blunder from Misfits, but I would say that it was just very quick thinking from SK, recognizing what their comp could do, the situation that they were in, and that they could just rush this Baron down, and now the way they're utilizing it, they're the ones in control of this game.
And you love to see it. Recognize the Cassio can shred through the Baron. The Senna can keep everybody healthy. It's everything that you want from a team in this scenario. When the pressure's on to make a clutch decision like that, have to praise whoever call it was in the end. But for Limit, now about the 80 soul points, so an additional 100 range, continuing to farm up. So the Senna, despite only looking like she has a few items, is actually very strong. We'll see now how SK want to play this, because as the Baron buff fades away, the game is now back again in a much more even state, and Misfits remain at soul point. The next dragon will be Dragon Soul if Misfits can secure it.
This next fight is going to be very important, but again, Misfits, the way they approach this Drake is through these narrow choke points. Trundle Pillar, Cassio Miasma, the W from the Senna, the Q poke from Crownshot, the Gangplank ultimate, the barrels. There are so many things that just get in the way that you've got to get around. And Danan, he doesn't have his teleport. That flank backline attack isn't available.
It's so good that you say that. I was about to be like, look at the flanking vision, Vedius. Look at all the places Vladimir could come from if he had a TP. But he does have a Tom Kench. Sadly, the Tom Kench ult was just
his ultimate.
used,
Yeah,
so.
I was just about to say the same thing.
All right, so Misfits have the dream setup. They're just missing one core component, which would be the TP.
So now Misfits is forced into a decision. Do they defend mid or do they go for the Drake? I think they should send 1 or 2 people to go and do the Drake right now while trying to hold mid lane, but they're actually sending all 5 to try and hold this tower. Here comes the Dan flank, he might find it.
This could be big. Dan, though, just going to back off. In a game state like this, you have to know that if Dan fails this flank, if they lose a team fight, it is pretty massive. No reason to take the risk there when Ocean Drake is spawning shortly.
We're waiting for Dan's flash to be up as well. Where's the Gangplank ultimate? Already used.
Both forms of CC now used by the Misfits lineup. It has not killed Trick yet, and that means SK are now going to be dominantly control the fight. But here comes Dan.
Watch Dan, watch him.
Here. Surprise, surprise! Oh, and Cassio burns the ultimate and gets nothing. Limit drops. Misfits backing away, though, staying steady, trying to stay in control of the fight. Still have to respect SK's lineup, but a good flank from Dan means they're in advantage state.
Bvoy going for the reset, has the TP. Keep an eye on these wards. His ultimate is down, so he's probably not looking for a flank ward, but he definitely wants to get back with the rest of his team.
Tipping away, the TP now coming in. Trick flashing into the pit, wants to deny soul point, and he gets another smite. Beautiful play from Trick. They take down the Sejuani as well. Are they going to try to win this fight? They can't, but they deny the point from Misfits. And they will give up 2 in the process. Bit of a messy exchange, but SK will not give up the Dragon Soul here.
Now the crucial thing, which we'll get to after the replay. Look, the Gangplank ultimate is used very early, along with the Varus ultimate rather. Trick soaks up a lot of the damage though, and with a good ulti onto Razork, he's able to stay alive. But then Dan comes in from the flank, uses his ultimate combined with the E and gets a lot of damage. Combined with a good snipe from Bvoy, finds a pick onto Limit, but that's not enough. Only finding a single kill, investing all of your ultimates means that SK can actually stick around. They force the Sejuani off, and look, they leave a small hole to allow SK to actually come into the Drake pit. They find a kill, and they steal away the Drake. But this is the crucial thing I wanted to mention. The Baron is now back up before Trick does. He's now making his way there. The TP rather is coming in. Razork coming in from the right-hand side.
They can shred with this Baron if they take the time, but for now they're just looking to set up the fight. Tom Kench Devour now used. Dan's going to be in trouble. The Crownshot running forward fearlessly. Dan wants to move his way into the back line. That's going to be a lot of healing. Controlling now coming out. That's a big combo, and Razork's looking for the follow-up. Febiven flashing into the front line. Sacre does nothing. Just walks face first into his own death. And that's just the right amount of range to find that kill. Misfits gonna move in and grab this Baron. SK.
We've been talking about it all game. Dan is the centerpiece. If he gets on top of the backline, that is how Misfits win these team fights. And the backline gave him an easy avenue of attack. They closed the gap for him, and Dan was just like, okay, let's party. Let's see what we can do.
Who am I to refuse a gift?
Yeah, who am I
delivered it to
refuse
me.
it? And initially it looks bad because he's taking a lot of poke from Crownshot and Limit. And you can see in this situation, the rest of his team is getting zoned off. Razork is at an awkward angle, and oh no, Dan been caught off from the rest of his team, and he's like, wait, why am I running away? I should be running in. The damage just melts through the squad. Crownshot gets obliterated. The ultimate takes Jenax and Limix extremely low, and Sacre trying to do what Dan did wasn't enough. And that's a hitbox. Bvoy able to find the snipe onto Limit, able to round things out with a good kill. Misfits now in control once again.
3K gold lead, Baron, or rather Dragon, staying away. 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Yay, Vladimir! He's back, guys. Woo! Fun, fun, fun. And this was the thing we've talked about all game, is that whoever you want to give scaling to, execution is still an important part of the fight, and there SK absolutely misexecuted. Sacre is going to watch that one back and wonder why he just ran in trying to auto-attack someone with the sword. But for now, SK just have to do their best to hold on. Misfits weathered the storm earlier in the game. SK will do their best to do the same and hope to reset to a somewhat even game state.
And now notice how Misfits have divided the map back up. They've got the map in a way that they want it. 1-3-1. No longer will they have to force these 5 versus 5s. They can just utilize their individual strengths. Dan, 3 items completed. The Void Staff sitting on top of him now. No one is going to be able to stop his power in that 1v1. And the Lucian, of course, 3 items done. Likely working towards an Infinity Edge or maybe a Bloodthirster next. Whatever he wants, regardless of what it is, he's going to be strong. And SK are just going to have to hold on to the siege as long as they can. The Baron, only about a minute left. Let's see if Misfits can break into the base.
This is the big question. SK for now, split up well. Have to see if Tom Kench ultimate's going to be utilized here to move them across lanes, but Bvoy just walking in and auto-attacking this turret. SK not willing to commit enough resources to defend that mid lane turret because they're being attacked on 3 fronts. And for Jenax, the cleanse now forced out. Don't really think he can stay there. If he misses his ultimate, he will die to Febiven. SK being pulled all around the map, and they might lose all 3 inhibitors on the back of this Baron, at least all 3 towers, because Misfits are just walking into this base. SK do not feel confident to contest.
Yeah, divide and conquer. SK's best bet is to just hard commit onto one of the 3 sides, but right now they're just being split apart. Jenax took a bad trade in the bot side of the map, and now they're 2 inhibitors down. Misfits slowly working on the 3rd, slowly looking to end their game, move themselves back up, and joining the rest of the LEC top teams with 8 wins.
Trick stepping in. Looks like this is where they've decided to commit, but they just set up Dan to come in on the flank. The entire team now has to back up. Miasma goes down, but it will not stop the pool from coming through. Jenax finally lands the ultimate. Dan's going to get taken out. Jenax now running for his life, but Febiven moving into Sacre. Sacre not really going to be able to get anything done here. Jenax just left for dead, and Misfits are just going to take this as an opportunity, an invitation to walk in the base and end the game.
We were so focused on the fact that Dan was being killed that we didn't realize Dan killed 2 other people. 3 members of SK are dead. Misfits looking to end the game.
Razork going in. Sacre will manage to survive, but that's going to be it. He may have kept his life. Misfits should be able to walk in and end this one. Creep wave is there, and now Razork can step forward. The rest of the team is here. Double 80 carries more than enough to finish this one out. They're taking a bit of sweet time with the Misfits moving up to 8-4.
Bit of a shaky mid-game there from Misfits. I loved the Baron from SK. Very quick thinking, recognizing the map state, knowing that Misfits wouldn't be able to respond in time. It looked like they almost had control of the game, but the Ocean Drake fight was a little messy for them, and then when it came to the next Baron, it was Dan who stepped up and did the damage needed to win out and secure that Baron for Misfits.
Yeah, and big praise to Dan for finding those flanks when he could. Of course, all of the carries really on the Misfits lining, stepping up across this game, but just a very difficult game for SK. You see the genius in their composition, but also know that all it takes is one of those flanks, one mistake in a team fight for Dan to really find a clutch win here on behalf of Misfits Gaming.
Misfits